woman's not a car.
Hello everyone, my name is Ivan. I'd like to welcome you to my channel. I am an influencer here on YouTube. I have been influencing things for over 5 years now. You look at this channel, you just see everywhere dozens of likes, and hundreds of views. Amazing. And today I'm going to engage in something that I usually do on this channel, which is constructive and measured criticism. A person could ask, well, what distinguishes constructive and measured criticism from other kind of criticism? Well, what really is the defining feature of my constructive criticism is that I never go for personalities. I never do it. I never go after the personalities here. It's always the issues. It's always the arguments. It's always like straight to the point, the way I operate on this channel. And you will look around my channel and you will not see a single personal attack, a personal criticism of a character that I'm going after. It's just not my style. And if you notice me doing that, if you notice me kind of slipping, if you see me seemingly attack somebody's personality or something like that, somebody's character, then please point it out, call me out in the comments. But of course that's a pointless thing to ask of people, because it just doesn't happen. I never go after personalities. I always focus straight to the issues. It's kind of when you go to sleep, you see a lot of random nonsense, and then you and your grandmother, who's into psychoanalysis, you try to figure out what actually goes on in your sleep. Whereas when I sleep, I just see arguments and points. I see the logos and the ethos. Things like that. Very coherent dreams. I don't even need to write an outline for these videos anymore, because it all comes to me at night. All the constructive and measured criticism. So today we'll be looking at the Canadian parapsychologist Jordan B. Peterson. Here Peterson has kind of a whacked out idea about relationships. Basically, if you get laid a lot in Peterson's universe, you might be a psychopath. However, if you jump straight into a relationship and marry that person without cohabitating before that, that's the foundation for marriage. Is just kind of leaping into it. There is no need to live together and find out who the person you're marrying actually is. So Peterson is very hostile to the idea of people cohabitating before marriage. And we're gonna look at the science. We're gonna look for the answers, as we always do here. And I want to welcome anybody who's came to see this video. I want to welcome the gentlemen. I want to welcome the young honeys who might be watching this. And yeah, we're gonna just dissect this together, and then we're gonna continue with our lives. How about that? Sounds amazing.
Can you please elaborate on why you advise against cohabitation before marriage?
Well, so why would I advise against cohabitation before marriage? Well, the simple answer to that question is there's plenty of evidence that it's a bad idea. And I just mean factual evidence to begin with, although I think there are other reasons. People who live together and then get married are more likely to get divorced, not less likely. And that's a really interesting fact, because it flies in the face of what you might think of as a kind of pragmatic common sense, because you might think, well, you don't buy a car without taking it out for a test drive. Right, and everyone laughs because that seems obvious, but then, woman's not a car. And neither is a man, and really, like seriously, really not an object. And so it isn't obvious at all that metaphor applies, even though it's, at first shallow glance, it seems obviously true.
So I have already mentioned me being an influencer on this platform. A lot of people listen to me. Some people can consider me to be their YouTube dad, somebody who guides them through the content on YouTube, which is can be very confusing, and there are a lot of videos on YouTube. I always kind of said this, people don't always listen, but there are so many videos on YouTube, and you need a guide, like a YouTube dad like myself, somebody who takes influencing very seriously. And in the spirit of this, I'd like to present my own metaphor for a relationship. Now, you might ask, Ivan, aren't you an incel without a honey? And I would say, let's not pay attention to that. Let's just look at the words and not the lifestyle, okay? The words and not the lifestyle, all right? The words and not the lifestyle. And so the way I view a relationship is kind of like a piano. When you buy a piano, you want to make sure that all the keys work. You want to make sure that all the melodies can be played on it. You want to make sure that it's predictable, that you don't suddenly hear something new. And so the different keys on the piano is different arguments you might have. So for example, you want to have a big argument, I think, before marrying somebody. You want to have a couple of big arguments so you can see how that person argues, so you can hit those notes and see what it actually sounds like. Because, like, as an example, we all know those people who can never admit that they're wrong. They can act as if, like, they'll never apologize to you directly, but they will act apologetically. Like, they might be nicer to you after a fight or something, but they'll never admit that they're wrong. You know, those people exist. And I feel like this is the kinds of things you want to find out before you get married. You know, that this person, you know, maybe that's enough for you. Maybe that's good enough for you, that a person acts apologetically while never actually apologizing. For, you know, maybe that's something that you're into and you want to go with this shit, you know, which is, you know, but it, you know, we have to find that out. We have to find out what it looks like if you're, for example, very thirsty and your partner is more asexual. You want to find that out, you know, before tying the knot. And so we really want to hit all those keys on the piano and then leap into the abyss, as Peterson will say, you know. But I do think that it's important to cohabitate, to spend some time together before whipping out those rings. But that's just my kind of a view. I am somebody who was only in love twice in my life, once in my 20s and once in my 30s, and neither of that turned out. And so you know, these are just my thoughts. These are just my thoughts. Again, you know, focus on the words and not the lifestyle.
Well, but if it's obviously true, then you might say, well, why are people who live together before they get married more likely to get divorced? And one possible answer to that is, well, people who are more likely to get divorced are the same people who are more likely to live together rather than to get married, and that's possible. It's very difficult to separate those two things out, but in some sense it doesn't matter. What the facts reveal is that if the goal is to learn what you need to learn so that you can decide who you should marry more effectively, or learn how to act if you do get married more effectively, and the goal is that your marriage will be better and last, then it doesn't work. And that's a strange truth.
So this finding is pretty counterintuitive, that actually people who cohabitate have higher divorce rates. And I was even wondering whether this was a bit of Peterson science, but I did some Googling and I find out that no, there are studies that kind of support this. So there is a study from the University of Denver, and they have collected information on 1,600 Americans who were married for the first time between 2010 and 2019. And the study found that 34% of marriages ended among those who lived together before being engaged, while just 23% of marriages ended among couples who waited until after engagement or marriage to move in together. So for one thing, 10% isn't that huge of a gap. You know, these are not the statistics around which you should change your philosophy toward a relationship. And the other aspect of this is that today, 70% of couples cohabitate before marrying. So there is that other 30% who have lower divorce rates. And I think that the reason for that is probably because they're religious. I think there are a lot of religious people for whom divorce is not an option, cohabitating is not an option. And, you know, they have marriages that they do. And some of these marriages aren't very happy. So there is, you know, there are some people who stick it out in a horrible marriage simply because they don't believe in divorce for philosophical or religious grounds. So basically there's a 10% difference between people who cohabitate and people who don't, and it's not such a big deal. And this is why actually I hate social sciences sometimes, because they pull shit out of their ass and they find a relationship without context. Like, there's so much context around here. For example, you know, people who are wealthier tend to have better marriages. But does this mean that you shouldn't get married if you're poor? Obviously not. There are a lot of factors that go into this, and I would like to see the cohabitation among different demographic groups, different economical groups, and see how all of this pans out together. So basically, you know, like 10% isn't something. It's noticeable and it's something worth noting, I guess. But it's highly unlikely that cohabitation alone is the only factor that decides why some people have a lower divorce rate.
I spent a lot of time studying criminal behavior in all sorts of different manifestations, some of it on the political front with regard to the behavior of people who committed terrible atrocities in the service of political belief. Some of it on the frontier of criminal sadism itself. I spent a lot of time studying the behavior of serial killers and mass torturers and people like that. And it has a lot of different aspects, antisocial behavior. But one of the markers for antisocial behavior, delinquency, childhood conduct disorder, early onset criminality, is early sexual behavior and multiple partners. And so, you know, you can...
Well, Peterson certainly has a case here with the psychopaths. I mean, look at Hitler. Look at all this cohabitation with Eva Braun that Hitler engaged in. You know, what kind of a marriage was it? It was, you know, the fucking Red Army had to march on Berlin for him to finally pull the trigger and marry, you know. This is like typical psychopathic behavior. You know, just sitting in the bunker. It's a kind of a bunker marriage. These are not... He should have leaped into Eva Braun right away, you know. Some people would say Hitler, you know, shouldn't he be the solitary father of the nation? Well, no. You know, he should have had Eva Braun there on the side. You know, everybody would have been... All the guys would have been fine with that. You know, as long as you have the fiery speeches and the spunk and all the enemies and so on, you know, they would have been fine with the First Lady Eva Braun. But because he's a psychopath, you know, he had this cohabitation going with her. Shameless cohabitation. Shameless. And another one of those Hitlerite crimes that we should never forget is that cohabitation. Damn. But it's interesting how Peterson, you know, it's kind of like... Peterson kind of... like, sex is something... Like, he promotes basically... Like, a distrust of sex as something like... Have you ever thought about putting your cat in a microwave and seeing what happens? Well, you must get laid a lot, you know, if this is what's going on. But anyway, dudes, don't cohabitate. Just kind of don't do the Hitler, you know. Don't wait until the last moment, you know. Just kind of leap into there right away, you know. You know, maybe if Eva Braun was around more, you know, Hitler wouldn't invade the Soviet Union. Who knows? You know, we don't know. It's the cohabitation. It's the cohabitation mystery that we need to be studying right now.
And maybe you need that vow before your community and God himself, let's say, or at least the state, and the vow that you've made to yourself and your partner, and the vow that you've made publicly to all your friends to keep you together when the going gets rough. And you might say, well, you don't need that. And I would say, well, that's just because the going hasn't got rough enough for you yet, because when it does get that rough, you'll bloody well know that you needed that. That's for sure. And that will definitely happen to you. That will definitely happen to you if you marry someone, because all the things that life can throw at you will be thrown at you in the course of a marriage. And so
I'm all about vows and commitments and stuff like that. I think it's a good idea. You know, there is a reason why marriage continues, because it makes sense to people. But it also makes sense to actually know the person who you're marrying before you marry them. Yes, cohabitate, damn it. Cohabitate.
what are you telling your partner? Well, as far as I can tell, if you live with someone, here's what you're saying to each other. You're the best I can manage at the moment. And maybe the same applies to me for you. And we both really don't want to take on any more responsibility than necessary. Plus, we both want to have the option of trading up if opportunity comes along. And so why don't we just make do with this provisional arrangement while we cast our eye out into the broader world and see if we can fish something better in.
That's a very cynical thing to say, Professor Peterson. Have you crunched the numbers on this? Have you measured people's actual love? Love can exist outside of marriage. And love exists when people make a commitment to live with each other. Of all the people in the world, this is the person you want to move in with and share your life with. And it's not this commercial, or it's not this cynical the way that Peterson presents it. He's arguing in bad faith, I feel. And he's caricaturing a position that he doesn't like, when the difference between the people who move in together and who get divorced and people who don't move in together who get divorced, the difference between them is 10%. It's not really that big of a deal. Like, it's not the study or the insight around which we should build our future, our lives. My friends, let's cohabitate together. Come on, all of you, come here and cohabitate with me and prove Peterson wrong. Let's cohabitate together, all of us.
And, you can say I'm cynical about that, but I don't think I'm cynical about that. Because living together means something like, well, we're not permanently committed, and not permanently committed means, well, we're impermanently committed, and impermanently committed means we're looking for a better commitment, or perhaps to be alone, but forget that, because that's usually not true. Well, what kind of basis is that to have a relationship with someone? How are you going to found a relationship on that? Especially an intimate relationship. How's that going to work? It's like, you'll do for now. I don't think that's a very solid foundation to move forward. A lot of heat. I need a lot of heat and pressure before I'm going to change, before I'm going to become purified in any real sense. And so what's the heat and pressure? Here's what it is. You don't get to run away. You're stuck with that person. And they're stuck with you. And you made a vow. It's like, uh-oh.
What is Peterson's marriage like? If I had to guess, I imagine that it's all based around him. Like, he makes these declarations and all of these, like presenting marriage as a heroic ordeal where people have to compromise themselves, in order to stay together with another person with this commitment. But I'm sure that his own marriage basically rotates around him. He is the suffering genius. His wife tends to him. She's a caregiver to him, and so on. So I think that he just kind of misrepresents his own marriage, that is very kind of centered around him, and makes it sound as if, he's wrestling with something. I don't think he's wrestling with anything in his marriage. He has a very devoted wife who sees him as a genius, as a suffering genius. She cares for him, probably in a, I mean, she doesn't choose his clothing, clearly. She doesn't even have that authority. Peterson goes out there dressed like the Riddler, and, you know, she can't even stop that in a marriage, you know. So this is a peculiar marriage, you know. I also would like to have a honey who would view me as a suffering genius and care for me and so on, you know, and then I can give these rambling talks about marriage and how much I have to sacrifice for it. Bullshit, you know. I don't think Peterson sacrifices much to his marriage. I think it's all kind of figured. Everything rotates around him. His wife comes home. Peterson is crying over Pinocchio again, you know, and that's the marriage. So I just don't buy his heroic presentation of marriage, this heroic and dramatic presentation of marriage. I just don't buy it.
It's a necessary act of faith. And, you know, in our culture, because we're not very wise, we think that faith means, especially when it's parodied as religious faith, we think faith means the willingness to suspend disbelief while swallowing a proposition that any fool would reject. That's often how the rationalist atheists view religious claims. Faith means the suspension of your rationality and the acceptance of an absurd claim. But that isn't what faith means. Not really. Faith is what makes movement into the unknown possible. And you need to move into the unknown because that's where you're moving. And because the unknown is unknown, because the future is unknown, you cannot step forward into the unknown without faith. It wouldn't be unknown if you knew it. If you knew it, it wouldn't require faith, but you don't know it. And so you step forward into the unknown future as a consequence of your faith in some principles. And if you love someone, if you fall in love with someone and you decide to marry them, you don't have the evidence at hand that that's the right person for you. What you have instead is the joint decision that come hell or high water, you're going to struggle forward together. And then you don't even know if that's the right decision, because you're not going to know till you've been married.
Love is one of the most powerful things we experience. Like, I never had a child, and maybe I'm a psychopath who's incapable of loving a child. I don't know. But I am capable of loving ladies, and I always go for the top shelf ladies, you know. And so when I was in love twice in my life, you know, it was a very powerful emotion. The only thing I can compare it in terms of the power of the emotion would be the loss of my grandmother when she passed away, because she was like my parent in many ways. And so this is something that should be managed very carefully, I feel, love. And one of the way to manage it is to see how it plays out against different parts of your life. See how you argue with each other. See how you are when you're kind of bored with each other. Maybe you're bored. Those things are worth experiencing before you get married. You know, it's important to have a moment maybe when, you know, you really just want to be alone from a person to whom, like, just a couple of days ago you were completely infatuated, and now you're just kind of bored and so on. And are you going to return to that commitment? Are you going to return to that relationship in spite of that boredom you might feel? Or, yeah, so yeah, you know, life vows are good, I feel. Faith is necessary. We have to have a faith in the person. But I feel that I feel that it's kind of late now, and I'm rambling a bit. But yeah, I just feel that, you know, you just have to check things out, and test tube your love when you're living together, and then put a commitment on top of that if you feel like it. And I think that commitment is powerful and meaningful, but you don't want to have any surprises. You don't want to just get married right away after a couple of months of knowing a person. I mean, that's ludicrous to me. So yeah, I also think that this whole statistic that he brings up, this whole kind of idea that those people who cohabitate, that they have a lower divorce rate. I'm sorry, have a higher divorce rate. I just don't really believe in that statistic too much. I think that it could be taken apart, and that there are a lot of more nuances to that statistic than what's apparent to us, just when it's isolated from everything else. Right, my friends, well, if you enjoyed this video, consider maybe liking this video, sharing it, consider maybe joining my Patreon. It's those kind of things when you have a small channel that mean a lot beyond just the financial contribution, which I appreciate. It just kind of helps the channel get going, keeps it kind of spunky, I guess. But don't feel pressure to do anything. So anyway, well, that's kind of that. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.